Hello and welcome. Today we are discussing the Afrobarometer. Now it's very strange because if you are in opposition, there's nothing sweeter than Afrobarometer Report. And if you are in government, there's nothing rubbish than Afrobarometer Report. And so you tend to find out, indeed, what is Afrobarometer? Who do they talk to? Why do they talk to them? Is it any credible? And I'll tell you why. Because the last Afrobarometer report, if you look at the indices, all the three regions up north, scored the lowest in terms of the most comfortable place to live with. However, in reality, it's one of the regions which are destitute and very poor. So then you ask yourself, who did they talk to that did not see hardship up north for them to score such, favorable reports? And that's what we are trying to figure out. Indeed, data is important, research is important, but what is the Afrobarometer? Stay tuned. When I come back, I'll introduce my guest. My name is Nana Sakwa, and this is PM Express. Afrobarometer, let the people have a say, and that's what the whole idea is about. Now with me to discuss the Afrobarometer and explain to us, educate us about the importance of the report, how the report comes about, who they talk to, how they talk to them, and what they are trying to get. We will all be educated by the end of the show. From my immediate left is Daniel Ama-Ato, who's a senior research and Afrobarometer project manager for Anglophone West Africa, which means there's a Francophone, if there's so we'll find out all about that. And then to my far left is Edward Fanko Amprechum, who's a research and member of the Afrobarometer team. So, gentlemen, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Daniel, let me start with you. Afrobarometer, what is it? So just educate us a bit.
Well, Afrobarometer is a non-partisan research instrument, and we try to collect information on so many issues like political governance, economic issues, ethnicity, social capital, perception about corruption, trust in institutions, and so many other issues. And this particular research is conducted in 35 African countries. We started in 1999 with 12 African countries. In 2002, that was the round 2. We increased the number of countries to 16. Then in 2005, round 3, we increased the number of countries to 18. In 2008, the number of countries increased to 20. That was the round 4. And then in round 5, which happened between 2011 2012, we increased the number of countries significantly from 20 to 35. The current Afrobarometer round is the round 6. And so we are still working in the 35 African countries. And actually, Ghana has been able to undertake 6 survey. So basically, that is the Afrobarometer. One key objective of the Afrobarometer is just to give a voice to the ordinary citizens in these countries. We believe for far too long, the elites of our various society most often believe they have the knowledge and they know what the ordinary citizens want. And so when it comes to policy decision making, we don't seem to factor into it what the ordinary person on the street is also thinking about the very issues we are trying to formulate policies around. And so the essence of Afrobarometer is to gauge the opinions of ordinary citizens and then release that information in the various countries, hoping that policy decision makers will take a look at them whenever they are working out the policies, and let that also influence the kind of decisions that they will be coming up with. Because at the end of the day, whatever policy decisions they take will go back to affect the very people who are saying these very things. So that is the essence of Afrobarometer.
But let me stay with you, Daniel. But the only people who really capitalize on your report is the opposition. And I'm pretty sure it will be, across African countries where the opposition latches on more to the information you release.
Well, let me say that we have seen this kind of reaction in Ghana, and I don't want to restrict it to just the current administration. Even in 2012, 2008, that was the previous administration time when we had that same results released, we saw some of these kind of reactions also coming up. So like you are saying, at times it seemed to me when people are in government, they look at the findings and they think it is an assessment on their performance, so they have to find ways and means of kicking against it. But when they are in opposition, they see it as an instrument that they can use it against the ruling party. And so that is how it works out in Ghana. But let me also add that in some of the countries where we do work, there has been some good collaboration between our Afrobarometer partners there and them, the government and then the opposition. Quite recently, our boss was in Cape Verde on a different program, but he had some kind of engagement with some opposition leaders and even government officials. And the conclusion he came to was that over there in Cape Verde, the ruling party makes use of Afrobarometer. The opposition also does the same. Some of them were telling him we use it to develop our policies for our party and maybe our manifesto and the rest. And I know, because Cape Verde is under me, I supervise the Afrobarometer work. Whenever they come out with their survey findings, they get invitation from the office of the president. They go in there and they present the findings. So they have, at times when they've not even started the process, the government officials will be asking them, when is the next round of Afrobarometer? So they have that kind of wonderful collaboration. In Sierra Leone, when they did their first survey, that was the time they were preparing their Millennium Challenge account document. And I know most of the information that they were using were coming from Afrobarometer. So that is the kind of collaboration that they have been having in Ghana. If for nothing at all, I do remember in 2005, when we came up with the Afrobarometer survey findings, we had an invitation from the Ministry of Finance when they were preparing the budget. We went in and we gave them a presentation on what the people were saying about the economic conditions and the rest, hoping it will influence the budget. So that collaboration at times do come. And so for me, I see it like I say, when people are in opposition, they think it is a nice tool against the ruling party. And when they are in government, then they see it as an attempt to more or less assess their performance, and therefore they have to find ways and means of ravishing it.
Edward, let me come to you, because you are a researcher, so you are the man on the ground. Now, how do you determine who to talk to and who not to talk to, so that the end result is good? I mean, if I had £1 million in my bank account, would you talk to me? And if I'm penniless, would you talk to me? And how do you do the sampling?
Yes, so the Afrobarometer is we use a nationally representative sample where we give every adult an equal chance of being selected. And what we've done over the period is that we follow the process that the Ghana Statistical Service uses in their population census. So we take the data and then do a selection based on that data. And then using their electoral area maps, we go into particular communities and identify people living in those communities and randomly select them. So it's a very rigorous process of selection of household members who then we engage through face-to-face interviews. So you know the person you're speaking to and you speak to them in the language they understand. So at different places, people use different languages in speaking to them, in communicating the information to them, so that the information we're getting is what the people want to say and not what we want to present of them. Across the country, for the round 6, we did 2,400 interviews with a margin of error of plus or minus 2% at 95% confidence interval. So that's what we do.
Let me add a little to what is said. In fact, this methodology issue has been one of the areas that people normally try to use, focus on when they want to discredit not only Afrobarometer, but all research findings. In fact, as my colleague said, Afrobarometer has a rigorous procedures that we follow. Even when it comes to selecting the enumeration areas, we use enumeration areas like the Ghana Statistical Service. We have this working collaboration with Ghana Statistical Service. They do the selection for us. Together with me, we sit and they do the selection of the enumeration areas randomly based on population probability to size. And that is, it means, for instance, if you take the various regions, we are looking at the adult population. Depending on the distribution of the adult population in the region, if a region has 10%, then in your sample too, that region should have 10% of your sample. So that is what we do. And then when we finish, the second part of the sampling is where you send field workers. So in this current round, we recruited almost about, let me say, 60 field workers. 48 of them were actual field workers who did the interview. 12 were supervisors because we constituted 12 teams. Each team has 4 field workers and 1 supervisor. They went to all the regions, and then the procedure is that when they get to the region, given the enumeration maps that they have, they identify the enumeration area because there are landmarks on it. They identify a particular location where the sample said they should go. They have to identify, based on procedure, they identify the households that they have to go in, and that is all done on random basis. And then when they go in there, they also look for adults who are 18 years and above. They list them, and then they randomly select one person from that household and talk to the person. So at every stage, there is some element of randomness in there. It's not like somebody going to stand by a street corner and then deciding on who to talk to. I like your face, I don't like your face. No, if your sample says this is where you should go, that is what you need to do. And let me also add that apart from that, we also follow the field workers into the field to make sure they are following the procedure and the protocols, and then ensure that there is quality in whatever they are doing. So for instance, my colleague was in Western and Central region. He monitored the field work there. I monitored the field work in Ashanti, Eastern, and Brown Hafu region. And so it's a rigorous kind of survey, and it is random, right from the selection of the years to the selection of the individual who we speak to.
Coming back to you on the selection, one of the things that, I think it was Felix Kwachifosu admonished you for was that most of the people you interviewed came from MPP areas, and therefore they will by all means say that they are not happy with the government. So I mean, how then do you make sure that I'm not in an MPP area or I'm not in a CPP area?
I would say that that is a false interpretation of the data and the process that we used. What you see, and there's nothing like an MPP area in Ghana or NDC area in Ghana. What we have is Ghana.
The Ashanti region will be predominant. Ashanti and Eastern region.
But what you see with our work is that following the national processes of the population processes, what we sought to do was to give equal proportions to what the populations in those areas. So for instance, if you are doing work, and if you go to our parliament, and you would notice that in certain regions where we have higher population clusters, you would have higher number of member of parliaments, okay, or number of seats in there. Sure. So for instance, the Ashanti region has the highest number of MPs, with, followed by Greater Accra and all the others. It's the same process. So there's nothing like focusing on an NDC area or an MPP area. What
purely by the numbers? Yes,
purely by the numbers in terms of the population representation in these areas. So that given the population in the Ashanti region, in the population in the Eastern region, etc., it would follow the same process. Apart from the Ashanti region, where the population, and Greater Accra, if you look at the percentages, I think it was similar percentages for Greater Accra and Ashanti region. Also. The rest were virtually the same. Volta region had 9%, Western region had 10%, Central region 9%. It was virtually the same across board. So there was no effort to give, what do you say, greater representation to some place than the other. It was purely a population representation process.
Let me also clarify this thing. I think I heard that argument, and that argument seemed to portray the idea that we went to just some specific regions. But I want to repeat that the survey covered the entire country. Yes. We went to all the 10 regions. And then also another aspect of the argument is that 20% of the sample is from Ashanti, 11 from Eastern region, giving us 31. And the question I ask myself is, does it mean all the people who we spoke to in Ashanti and then Eastern region are MPP supporters? Because we don't go asking for the political affiliation of the person before we talk to that person. We select you randomly. You could be CBP, you could be PPP, you could be NDC, you could be NPP. We don't bother about that. All that we are looking up for is your opinion on the issues. So that also, to me, does not really hold. The other argument I want to add to it, taking out the 31 from 100%, we are left with 69. That 69 is coming from the 8 regions that NDC also won the election. So does it mean all those 69% are also NDC members, and they are part of those who are also giving the negative assessment? So I think some of these arguments, when we are bringing them out, we need to check our facts a little bit before.
You've tarnished my next question then, but 2,500,
2,400.
2,400,
Yeah.
can it be a true reflection of 25 million people? Can't you do about 100?
Yeah, let me start from this angle. For instance, if you look at even the Statistical Service, which is a public institution, the Ghana Living Standard Survey, and then the Demographic and Health Service that they run, because it's a public institution, they have the resources. I have checked some of their survey sample size 18,000, even not up to 500,000. Yet I heard somebody also say he should have interviewed 1 million people before that would be representative. You see, the issue about sampling is that it is not about the number of people you talk to. It is about how you select that number. So for instance, the 2,500, because of the randomness in the selection, and because of the way we make sure the proportion of the sample reflects what is in the national adult population, that is why we are saying it is very representative. And in any case, I have this kind of analogy I always use. I am here to see somebody who has been to the hospital and is being asked to do a blood test. I'm here to see that person telling maybe the laboratory technician drain all the blood in my system and use it to conduct the test. They drain just a little bit, and when they conduct the test, based on the results, you are treated and you get well. That is sampling. The small bit that they draw is a sample of your blood, but it works for you. Why is it that when we use it in survey, we have a challenge with it? So the issue is not about the numbers. The issue is about how you go about selecting those people. That is how we should understand this sampling bit.
Edward, now, I'm a fairly educated man, but I still can't get my head around macro indicators and macro indices and stuff like that. So when you go out there in the hinterlands and, the guy has just come out from his cassava farm and they sit down and asking him, what do you think about the macro indicators? I mean, I'm sat here in the studio, I have a challenge. How do you expect them to give you a fair answer?
Okay. What happens is that before we send people to the field, we take them through very rigorous training processes. Mm-hmm. Within the training processes that we take them through, we also take them through translation of the questionnaire at various stages, back translation and the translation itself, so that they translate into the language and then back from the language into English. So that is what we do. In terms of the questionnaire, as much as possible, there are no technical words in there. Mm-hmm. As much as possible, there are no technical words in there. And because field assistants are administering the questionnaire in the language that the people understand, we try as much as possible to get them to understand the import of the question. They read the question as it says, and it's explained clearly to them before they respond. If a respondent is unable to understand anything, or even asks you that you should go back on one thing, what we advise them to do, and what we see to it that they do, is that they go through the entire thing to ensure that they really understand what they are doing. It's important that issues about language is clarified. And that is why we go through those rigorous processes to ensure that the right language is communicated and the people understand it.
In fact, let me give you an example of some of the questions that we may. In fact, when we are doing the analysis, we try as much as possible to let it stand out clearly. But like he said, we try to narrow down the question to the level of the ordinary citizen. So for instance, those questions about prices and the rest, it's a straightforward question. The question just asks the respondent, how well or badly do you think government has performed in reducing prices?
Instead of using inflation.
In reducing prices, in managing the economy, in controlling corruption. It's a straightforward, direct question. There are no technical strings around it, so you can easily understand.
I'm going to take a break here. When I come back, we're going straight to Edumasa, and I'm going to find out how retrospective and prospective assessment of national economic conditions. How would they say that to me in Edumasa so that I can give a fair answer? Stay tuned. Much for staying, and we're discussing Afrobarometer. Everyone should have a say. Now, just before we went on the break, I was going to transport you all from Kokoblemle right down to Edumasa, where I'm sat under a tree, you know, minding my own business, and these fine gentlemen come and they want to find out from me retrospective and prospective assessment of national economic conditions. I mean, so Edwin, let me come with you. I mean, so what then do you tell me?
Basically, in designing the questionnaire, what we try to do is to present it in very straightforward language. So as you're reading there about retrospective, it won't be cast in that way in the questionnaire. It will be cast in the last year or in the past year. Okay, so that's how it's presented. We want them to explain to us or tell the economic conditions in the past year. When you're talking about the perspective, we're talking about the economic conditions in the coming year. So
as compared to this year?
Yes, as compared to the current year. So that is, or their present circumstance. So the language is presented in a very simple way that any ordinary person sitting under a tree, cooking banku, or doing anything that we just chance on you based on the representativeness of a sample, if you get selected, you should be able to explain or should be able to have a conversation on the issues that affect your life.
Anyway, by the way, 52% of us thought that last year was better than this year, you know, as per your report.
Yes.
Now, the other thing which, now this is my personal one, makes me doubt, you know, who you spoke to. And one person who is always championing the living conditions in the 3 regions up north. No dentist, 93,000 people to a doctor, poverty-ridden, most people who go to bed hungry, access to education, clean water, everything, you know, that has to happen in Ghana, you know, needs to go up north so that we bridge up north this guy. However, national economic conditions by regions, you know, they come up, they are the least with problems. Personal living conditions, I mean, Upper West, you know, only 49%, you know, had problems. The rest are saying that, you know, they are good. So then I'm wondering, who did you talk to up north for them to come up with such favorable answers?
Let me say, I understand where you are coming from, but once again, this is a matter of sampling. The question is a personal question you pose to the respondent. So depending on the kind of assessment the respondent will do, then the respondent gives you that response. So for instance, if you look at the economic conditions, those who are saying very badly or fairly badly, if you look at the regions that you have mentioned, they are all way below the national average. But once again, take a clear look at the figures and you realize it's only, even in those regions, more than half.
Okay, if I take personal living conditions by region, the national average was 71%.
Yeah.
That's the national average.
Now, and then you have Upper East having 49, Northern 60. So with the exception of Upper East, you can even see that Northern Upper West also have more than half. 60%, 61% saying
times
it
are
is
hard.
Very bad for them. So even though the figures are below the average, you are still seeing huge numbers saying times are difficult. That is how I am looking at it. In fact, when you come to the economic conditions too, clearly we have the same 3 regions, including Greater Accra. That is, national average is 80. But then you have Greater Accra 72, Upper West 61, Northern 58, Upper East 55. Once again, they are all above half. More than half of those that we spoke to are saying it is fairly bad or bad. So that is how I look at it. It is below the average. Maybe you are expecting that it will be above.
No, but see, because in reality, the three northern regions are the most deprived, and hence they have to do Suba and Sada, and they turn around and still embezzle it, and we need to find something else. So we bridge north-south divide. It is not a secret that the three northern regions have been neglected through one way or the other since Ghana was formed. Before the colonial master, since we inherited, it's nobody's fault, but it's there. So if there's any survey, and I want credibility, I'm expecting about 93%, people within the three northern regions say, Charlie, times are hard here.
It depends. Yeah. It's more, this, you see, this survey is about your personal living conditions. It's the rating of their conditions.
Sure.
So given their circumstance and where they find themselves and how they situate their conditions compared to others, to them, this is what they say.
So how do you manage to find the only few people who have got good lives living in the up north? I mean, look at the amount of kaya flogging, the amount of child adoption coming down, forced marriages. I can list, the statistics shows 93,000 people to one doctor. So you probably talk to, the person who got to see the doctor?
Let me explain the sampling procedure, for instance. For instance, when you get to the field, after you have identified the enumeration area, you've identified the particular location where you have to conduct the survey, we have what we call the sampling start point. You identify a fixed structure, and then the field workers will move away from that point. And as they move away, there is this random interval that we use in counting the households on both right and left. So you count maybe 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 10th household, you go in there, you look for all the adults who are 18 years and above. If it is female respondent that you are looking for, so you list all the females who are 18 years and above. You have a process where you use this blind deck card, a card with numbers on it. You shuffle it like playing cards, you place it face down, you ask one person to pick a number. The number that you speak, the names that you have written, you identify the number that is assigned to that name, and that person becomes your respondent. So invariably, you have no control. You may end up picking people who are workers, people who are not workers. That is a sampling procedure. And like you said, you are expecting 93, and that is your expectation. Yes. That is your expectation. It's true, when we went into the field monitoring, at times when the interview is going on and you are looking at the responses the person is providing you, from where you sit, you end up judging that this person is not being, but that is the person's opinion. You can't run away from it. Their opinion is that they are well off. That is it. You can't do anything about it, even though we know conditions are harsh there. And one thing we must also remember is that conditions may be harsh there, but there may also be some people who are also better off. So these are some of the issues.
But the other point is that compared to what their circumstance was before, and as at the time they are describing their personal living conditions, maybe to them things are better than what it used to be. So that is how come.
You think maybe my expectation is too high?
And it's more likely that urban residents and people in the south who have been exposed to more social conditions would be expectant of better or greater stuff. So they would say that the living conditions are worse or are bad compared to their current situation. So it's more of where you've come from and how far you're going. So I think that might also affected their responses. But for us, we're just reporting the opinions. This is what they say. And so that's what is presented there.
You're not allowed to ask them when's the last time you saw a doctor, and therefore you can't say you are.
No, you just have to say
whatever it is they say.
Yes, yes.
Because that's one thing which really, I found quite surprising, that the most deprived regions, came up trumps in terms of living conditions. So I thought I need to ask you so that we can clarify that decision. Has it always been like this? You see, because we are so politically drunk that, I expect people from Volta region, people from Northern region, don't say anything bad, because then you make your government look bad. And the same way, if Kufuor was president and he went to Kumasi, they would also say all good things, because if I say something bad, my president looks bad. And it has become a very dangerous culture where we only demand accountability when we are in somewhat opposition, and therefore people who cost of living is going up by what, 70.5%. Anybody on the government side will say it's good, we need money. Anybody outside of government will say no, it's bad. And that's the Ghanaian. So how is that not affecting your results?
Yeah, let me say that clearly. Whenever I'm analyzing Afrobarometer survey data, some of these issues jump up at me. And I also look at it at times from that angle. And even the information we are having, if you look at it, you may be able to draw those kind of, and I cannot say we have done that kind of analysis yet, but when you look at even the regional distribution, you may be able to see a little bit of what we are talking about in there. But let me also add that the Afrobarometer, we have a particular question which seeks to find out the political affiliation of the respondents. But if you want to get a true reflection of some of these things, you can do a cross-tabulation between that question and other issues, and then you can get a clear sense. I remember I did a paper on even ethnicity issues in voting, and what you are saying clearly came out from Afrobarometer data, that people who are in a particular region tend to vote for a particular political party, and it tends always the same. So these are some of the issues that we cannot run away from. Really, our society is polarized on these two political party lines, and so most of some of these things also do play a role in the kind of opinion that people form. But what I personally think is coming out from this current survey is that you look at the numbers who are doing the negative, giving the negative assessment, is so huge, and therefore you cannot say that they are coming from just one party and not the other. I monitored the field work, and as I sat through some of the interviews, people will be giving the negative assessment, and when those questions are asked, which party are you affiliated to? The moment they mentioned the party, and then you wonder, and you gave all this negative assessment, and yet you belong to. For me, what I rather see is Ghanaians are now becoming sophisticated. They are now seeing reality, and so it gets to a point they don't believe in, I am affiliated to A or B. What I have to say is what I will say. That is how I am looking at this data, but I will not sit here and say what you are saying normally do not play a role. Not only Afrobarometer, most research work that we do in CDD, some of these things
let me add that in doing this interview or in undertaking this kind of survey, what we try to do is to give the respondents information about who is conducting the survey and everything, and the fact that it's an independent process and all of that. But what has happened is that over the period, a lot of the time they suspect it's even government that has sent us to come and interview them. So it is not about them versus us or the other side, okay? So it's more of what they think that should be the case. They're telling us the story of what their lives or what their living conditions are, what social situations they are living in, and how they see it at the time of the survey. So that kind of, that really explains why we have the kind of findings. But of course, as he said, where the person's political affiliation lies, what they believe in, might color their thinking at a point, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for your current, your opinions on these governance issues, your political governance, your social governance, economic governance issues, and then we take it as it is.
The new report is out, and Ghanaians' evaluation of public service delivery. Stay tuned. We'll come back and tell you what Ghanaians think about public service delivery. Well, thank you very much for staying, and Afrobarometer, let the people have their say. What an important thing. I mean, if you live in a country where there's no data, you might as well not live at all. It's very important. And I think we should all urge and support it. But as we support it, we should make sure that, all done prim and proper. But the new release is Ghanaians' evaluation on public service delivery. Was it all one and you break it into two, or this is a separate research?
Yeah, the Afrobarometer questionnaire is very bulky.
Okay.
Roughly, we have, if you count the questions,
100
individually, you will be getting close to about 200 questions.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's very bulky. And so when it comes to releasing the findings, we've come to, initially, in some of the previous rounds, we used to release everything at a go. Then we realized it makes discussion on some of these topical issues a bit on the low side.
Yeah.
So of late, the decision has been that when we get a survey, what we need to do is to look at some of the topical issues and then release them in batches.
Okay.
So for now, what we are doing is planning for 4 different dissemination. We've done 2, and we are yet to complete 2. As I'm speaking to you now, I'm working on the 3rd dissemination, which we are hoping we will be able to finish that before the end of this month. So just to make sure the issues that we are raising will catch the attention of policymakers, rather than throwing out everything and then it will be difficult for them to find their way through which one to work with and which not to. We are now going in this kind of staggered dissemination. So the second one is also from the same survey. It's the same survey data, but we are analyzing them based on topics that we want to put out there.
I mean, it says most Ghanaians are dissatisfied with government's delivery of public service such as electricity, healthcare, education, water and sanitation, and road maintenance, and the latest Afrobatometer survey findings, that's what they're showing. The numbers are pretty huge. I mean, you look at 75% bothered about electricity, 66%, 68% on road, water and sanitation, 66%. I mean, so generally the country is very dissatisfied with.
Yeah.
Yes, so from the kind of data we found, there is a general dissatisfaction with service delivery, be it electricity, water, roads, sanitation, education and health. And you'd see it, and if you go down to the regional analysis, you would see that it also follows a similar process, where respondents in the Western region, for instance, when you check that against the national average, they are dissatisfied with electricity, roads, sanitation, education, all of it. You go to Greater Accra, the same thing. If you go through the Eastern region, you'd have the same kind of situation. With Ashanti region as well. It's only in the BA and Central region where there's higher dissatisfaction. In the Central region, for instance, there's higher dissatisfaction with electricity and road maintenance. And these kind of responses you get, if you go back to these communities currently and you go and ask about the kind of electricity supply they're getting, they're going to tell you that whatever they're getting is bad. I spend a lot of time in my work in the Central and Western region, and I tell you, they have one of the worst conditions with electricity, but the lights always goes off. Okay? If you go to the BA, there's a higher dissatisfaction for sanitation, education, etc., and then health. But if you go back to the data on the availability of public services, you'll see that it's in the BA where they have less schools. Okay? They have less health facilities. So the people are not talking in a vacuum. They're linking whether the facility is there, 1, and 2, the kind of service they're getting from the facility. And that is what you're getting there. They're very discerning and they understand the situation they found themselves in. And that is why they're reporting the way they report.
Yeah, but I'd like to add to what my colleague said. Really, one thing that jumped out at me when I saw the analysis was the availability of electricity grids in the various communities that we did the survey. If you go back to that data, 84% of our field workers found electricity grids, the electricity poles, cables connected, and all those things. But now when they ask the people, what do you think about government performance in terms of providing reliable electricity supply? Then we get 75% saying very badly, very badly. And this tells me the people are not just looking at the fact that you have provided the facility. What are they getting out of the facility? And I use this analogy that if, for instance, you put out the school block, you provide the decks and everything, and then the kids go to school and there is no teacher to teach them. You expect the parent of that kid when you go and conduct an interview to tell you because the facility is there, I am happy. No, they will never tell you that. So the issue is about, like he said, the kind of quality services they are getting from the facilities and not the fact that we have the facility. And these are some of the things. I'm not saying providing the facilities are not important in this kind of service delivery. The facilities are important. But as we provide the facility, do remember that there is a duty, a responsibility on those who are working within that facility to provide that quality service. So if you provide the facility and the people working there are not providing the quality service, the facility will be there, yet they will rate the performance as very badly. So that is how we should be looking at this data.
Then let me say, are we underestimating the average Ghanaian? Because we always have this idea that, oh, they are ignorant, he hasn't been to school or she hasn't been to school, therefore they don't know what time it is. I think we are underestimating people.
In fact, it's not an understatement to say that. And this is something that Afrobarometer is trying to clear. That's why I began by saying Afrobarometer objective is to provide a voice to what? Ordinary citizens when it comes to policy. It's like we really do not factor into consideration these kind of opinions from ordinary citizens. I always ask people, why is it difficult for us to come to the point of accepting that even whether they are not elected, they still have an opinion, and this is what they are saying, so let us work with it. Because at the end of the day, it's the same person who is not elected who on the 7th of December 2016 will go and queue. When they are voting, that's when their opinion matters. But when it comes to expressing their opinions on how the country is being governed, that one, it doesn't matter. I think it's something that we need to take into consideration seriously. Otherwise, we will end up always rubbishing ordinary citizens' opinion. And as I said, from the data that I'm seeing, Ghanaians are becoming sophisticated. Yeah. A day will come, maybe currently we are seeing a situation where these things are not factored into who they vote for. But a day will come, I'm telling you, when people will start factoring this into it. And if you keep on playing with this kind of survey findings, not only Afrobarometer, but all survey findings, you will wake up only to realize you've been kicked out of power. That is how I look at it. So for me, it's something that people should be looking at. We shouldn't be underestimating the opinion. You know, I used to tell people, my mom used to tell me, there's a difference between book knowledge and house knowledge. So if the person has never been to school, still the person can speak and you can see wisdom in what the person is saying. And that is how we should be looking at some of these things.
I mean, the common sense says that, I mean, if I were ruling government, any government, you've done my homework for me. Because then I don't have to go and guess, because I just know that this is where I'm falling short. So just, channel your energies there. So I'm wondering why till this day, successive government, not this one, all governments fight it instead of, capitalize on it. I don't know if you've done a research on it.
We haven't done any research to know why governments across tend to respond to survey work in this way. And it's difficult, but at the same time, you have governments that support a national institution like the Statistical Service to collect data and use it for planning, etc. So it means that there is value in survey data. And for me, I think that it's important that when we take a close look at what has been presented in terms of the methodology, in terms of consistency of the data that has been presented and the quality of the data, and then begin to pay attention to what it's telling us. As you said, it's important that you look at it as almost cooked food. It tells you, giving you pointers about where the people are dissatisfied, what can be done, where they are satisfied, and what needs to be improved upon. And I think that serious minds should pay attention to this. For instance, if you go back to the data and looking at what the policy options that citizens want government to focus on, they're talking about economic management, they're talking about education and electricity, they're talking about health. If you go back 2 years ago, we were talking about unemployment, we were talking about education and health. Go back 2008, they were talking about water, they were talking about education. It tells you that at different points, they're pointing their eyes to particular things. We've all been part of what we saw in the early part of this year with issues about cedi depreciation and the general issues about economic management. So I wasn't surprised that citizens were pointing at economic management, to be specific. They're pointing at electricity, they're pointing at education, they're pointing at health, and the problems with the NHIs, etc. So the people are speaking, and all governments, and not just governments alone, civil society, opposition, all actors, the media, need to tune their minds to it's what this data is pointing at and what can be done. And for me, that is the value we should see in this survey work.
And let me, for instance, say that I remember, was it yesterday or so, around 6 o'clock when I was listening to the Joy News and I heard of this Tabora incident.
Yeah.
I started laughing. I was laughing not because I was happy with what the people did, because destroying the facility will rather worsen your problem. So I don't support that idea. But I just told myself, these are some of the things when ordinary citizens have spoken and they are saying we are not getting reliable electricity supply, and those who are supposed to provide these things will rather rubbish their opinion. When they become angry to some extent, this is how they are going to react. It is not right for them to react that way, but this is what will happen. And for how long are we going to wait till people get into this kind of situation before we start thinking about? So for me, these are some of the things. And I like the way you said this is more like an already cooked food. I remember in the second release, the chairperson for the day said he is calling on policymakers and politicians and the rest not to be attacking survey findings and research findings, but rather they should see those who do this kind of job as unpaid consultants for them. So at the end of the day, they are gathering information that we should be paying for, and then you can easily use it. So that is how we as Afrobarometer, we will want policymakers and maybe those who are in government, those who are outside government, to treat Afrobarometer data. It is not meant for this kind of political ball game. It is meant to improve the lives of the ordinary people who provided that information.
Indeed, I'm here to see an area where they only turn off the opposition's lights or turn off the tap of the opposition people's number 2 is not in our party, so switch off their light and leave house number 3 on. So when it comes, everybody's happy. But so what's the next one coming out? I mean, this one is for civil service, public service. So the next one is what?
Yeah, we have so many topics that we are now thinking of. We have something on corruption perception and then trust in public institutions. We also have something on public officials' performance, job performance assessment, and then local government service delivery performance. We also have issues on democratic values, attitudes, and beliefs of Ghanaians. So there are so many topics, but we are hoping we may be able to come up, as I said, with the third one before the end of this month. So hopefully we will throw an invitation to you when the time comes.
I'll be there. Is there anywhere in the questionnaire that you ask them for what they would have want, like suggestions? Do you do suggestions, or they just tell you how they feel? I mean, is there anywhere, what would you want to see?
Yeah, in fact, in the questionnaire, as my colleague pointed out, for the economic aspect, there is a particular question that asks people what they think are the 3 most important problems that government should address. And as he said, for all the previous surveys, always it is unemployment followed by education and either health or water.
Okay.
It is only in this round that the whole thing changed. And then people were asking for economic management.
Wow.
And so when I look at the data, I told myself, unemployment and all these things are specific. But now they are looking at the broader picture, manage the economy well, and all these things will fall into place. So there is a question on that. On the service delivery too, there is a question that asks them, if government is to spend money, extra money on specific things, which ones would they want government to focus on? And then they mention
education,
health, and education.
Wow.
So there are some questions that allow you to get the policy preferences of the ordinary citizens. So these are the kind of questions we also ask.
Well, it just comes to confirm that this is just homework done for you. Just pick it up and do what you need to do with it.
And what we've seen is that at different points they pick it up and use. In government, I've seen ministers quote Afrobarometer findings at different points. So depending on which one works for them, they choose and pick and use it. The same thing happens to members of the opposition. They would come in and pick the data and use it, but when they see themselves on the other side, Afrobarometer becomes the bad child in the room and has to be whipped. So that is really the issue.
35 countries. I mean, we've spoken on Ghana. How are the other African countries? I know Cape Verde is receiving it very well, and they are capitalizing on it. You go and do the work, and I'll just channel my energy where I have to do. How about the other African countries?
Yeah, in fact, in some of the countries too, we do have that kind of wonderful collaboration with government officials. I mentioned Sierra Leone as one. I know about Cameroon. Even Cameroon, the institution that does the survey is based at their university, and so we were afraid it would be difficult for them to release the results, but they did it. And I remember their dissemination, they invited government officials and the rest. That is how it works. When I went there to monitor their fieldwork and other things, I even had to go to the vice chancellor of the university and talk to him about it, and he was happy. So we have this kind of wonderful support also in some of the countries. And apart from politicians and maybe policy decision makers, we have had instances where even some universities use the Afrobarometer data for academic work. Individuals also have been doing a lot of writing with Afrobarometer, because funding for Afrobarometer is from mainly multilateral donors, USAID, World Bank and the rest, and so we see it as a public good. The only thing we do is when we collect fresh data, there is a moratorium on it for 1 year. After 1 year, the data is freely available on the website. So if you go onto the Afrobarometer website now, from round 1 up to round 5, the data will be there. You can download it, you can use it to do your own writing and whatever. We also have even online data analysis facility that you can use to do whatever you want to do. So that is how Afrobarometer works in most of the countries. And let me even say this. In Malawi, their recent election, when Afrobarometer results came out, it predicted, because of that question, who would you vote for? It predicted that the current president is going to win the election.
Wow.
And then Afrobarometer was tagged as belonging to the government. In the election, it came to pass. In Burkina Faso, what we are seeing now happening in Burkina Faso, our last round Afrobarometer survey, 2012, majority of Burkinabe said they want the president to go by 2-term limits.
Wow.
And you see, when that incident happened, we were in Cape Town on Afrobarometer program, and it was coffee break. Some of us were discussing how the whole situation is turning out, because that was the day they were going to Parliament to vote on that bill to change the presidential term limit. And we were discussing it. We went back into the workshop, less than 30 minutes. Somebody told us people have toppled Campari.
Wow.
So this is how Afrobarometer data can be used. The data was clearly saying, we don't need you to change this.
Wow.
We want 2-term, and you wanted to do it.
Thank you.
These are some of the things we need to see, and then use Afrobarometer to inform our decision making.
Thank you very much, Edward. Thank you, Daniel.
You're welcome.
It's been educative, it's been informative, and indeed research and data. All I can say is we need more. We need more, probably once a month, to see how people's lives change on a monthly basis rather than even a year. But as I will say, thank you very much for watching, and tomorrow we'll be back to do it all over again.